So please welcome our guest, Mr. David Williams.
Good afternoon. As Victoria said, Jesus makes all the difference. Jesus is the only reason why I'm standing here today. 23 years ago, Jesus entered into my life, and he has changed everything radically. For the past 21 years, I've had the privilege of serving our Lord in ministry. And for the past 7 years, he's burdened my heart to be a voice for the unborn and to be a minister to men who have been broken by abortion in their past. For the past 19 years, I've had the privilege of being married to my best friend, Taria. And we have 6 wonderful children, ages 17, 16, 13, 10, 5, and 2. We have 2 other children we'll meet in heaven from miscarriages. I have an older son from a previous marriage named Sakari, who's 26, who lives in Pittsburgh. But not until a few years ago was there another child that I very rarely thought of or I very rarely talked about. It was the child that I didn't protect as a 19-year-old college student, that I was silent and I was complicit in her death. So you're looking at a man who knows the loss, the pain, the shame, the guilt, the wounds, the negative effects of abortion. And yet you're looking at a man who knows the forgiveness, the grace, the healing of Jesus Christ for those wounds. You know, I represent today an audience that we need to reach out to, and an audience that we're called to reach out to, men. And today I want to share with you a little bit, testify to the grace of God and how he has transformed my life, how the impact of Christ has impacted my marriage, my family, and the ministry he's called me to. Growing up as a kid, I grew up in a family where my dad was often drunk, and my dad would be verbally abusive to my mom, and he was verbally and abusive to me and my brother, and at times physically abusive to us. Because of the way that my dad was, my mom would often work double shifts to be away from home. So that left me with my dad, and my dad would party with his friends, and he would drink, and I would see my dad treating other women like they were queens when he treated my mother as if she was dirt. And so I saw my dad in adulterous relationships, and as a little boy telling me that as I grew up, that I should do likewise, and encouraging me to look at pornography and things such as that. When I was 11 years of age, my mom and dad divorced. And a few years before my mom and dad divorced, I started going to church. I had a drug problem. My grandmother drugged me to church, so I started going to church. And when my mom and dad divorced, my mom started going to church. And shortly after going to church, there was a man who took an interest in my mom. The thing is that this guy was married. This guy had 5 kids. This guy was on staff at the church. And for the next 7 or 8 years, I saw this man in an adulterous relationship with my mom. As a teenager, all of my friends were either having sex or saying that they were having sex, but I wasn't having sex. I was looking at pornography. I was listening to music that was sexually explicit, that was sensual, and watching TV shows and movies that were the same. And with that and all that I had gone through, I ended up graduating from high school a virgin and never having sex. But I had a heart that was very defiled. And I had a very wrong perception of a number of things. I had a wrong perception of what it meant to be married. I had a wrong perception of what it meant to have a family. I had a wrong perception of sex God's way. I had a wrong perception of what it meant to be a father. And I had a wrong perception of God himself. When I graduated high school, I was headed off to college, and I had 2 goals. One goal is that I was going to be in a relationship with a young lady, and I was going to have sex. The second goal is I was going to graduate from college. As a 19-year-old sophomore in college, I got into a relationship with my first girlfriend. I thought I loved her. We began having sex very early. Very soon after we began having sex, she came to me with news that I wasn't ready to hear, nor was I prepared to hear. She was pregnant. And she was asking me the question, David, what are we going to do? She's asking me, David, what are we going to do? And all I'm thinking about is I'm not ready to be a dad. I'm not ready to be a husband. Maybe later down the line when I graduate from college, I'll think about it, but I'm not dropping out of school to be a husband, to be a father, and to be married. And I didn't think it was right that she should. And so I took those things that I was thinking about, and I convinced her that an abortion would be the best thing for us to do. We're young. We love each other. We can get married later on. Let's not allow this to interfere with our lives. She agreed with me, but there was this question she kept asking me, and she asked me from the day that I said that until weeks later when she had the abortion. She kept asking me, David, do you think it's the right thing to do? And every time she would ask me, I would hem and haw, but get back to the answer of yes, I think this is the right thing to do. I remember the morning when she was going to have the abortion. It was during the summer. We're not even together. She's in one city. I'm in another city. I'm a man who's telling her she should have an abortion, but yet I'm not man enough to get in my car and drive 6 hours to drive her to the abortion clinic. Her mom takes her to the abortion clinic. Afterwards, we speak, and I can't even understand anything she's saying. She's crying so uncontrollably, unconsolable. There's nothing I can say. She's trying to explain to me what happened to her. She was so traumatized by it. And all I could think of was in a few days she'll be okay and everything will be all right. Well, everything wasn't all right. Pretty soon our relationship came to an end. Man, I was filled with so much anger and I was filled with so much rage. Man, I was so depressed. People call me bipolar because I went from high highs to low lows. I was so consumed with drinking alcohol because I had to consume my sorrows with something. I became very promiscuous, and I treated women as if they were objects just to be had. And I had this unhealthy pursuit of getting my college degree because I had to prove that I wasn't a failure. And I ended up graduating from college, and the behavior of my life didn't change. And I found myself a little after graduating with another young lady who has an unplanned pregnancy. And because what happened to me at 19 years of age, I didn't want to go through that again. It didn't fix anything. It didn't help anything. It brought a lot of brokenness and pain to my life. So I decided I would be with her and I would marry her. And I used to always think when I grow up, I'll never be like my father. I'll never treat a woman the way my father treated my mother. I'll never treat kids the way my father treated me and my brother. I was exactly like my dad. I had this anger and rage that came out on my wife. I have a son that's born. It's supposed to be the greatest day in my life, and I find it hard to bond with my son. And just like my father, I'm running around and I'm sleeping with other women. And after a few years, I find myself going through a divorce. And yet there were some men that God put around me, some men who would talk to me about Jesus and talk to me about God's love and talk to me about forgiveness. And God radically opened my eyes and opened up my heart to the love of Jesus Christ when I was 26 years of age. And I began to experience forgiveness and healing and grace. And there were some things that God radically broke off of my life. From that day until this day, the only woman I've had sex with is my wife. I've never been drunk another day. The altar upon which I laid my child down, that I sacrificed my child on the altar of education and a career I gave up to follow the Lord into full-time ministry. God brought my wife into the picture a few years later, a godly, loving wife. We got married and started having children. But there were some things in my life that I still struggled with. I had this intense anger and rage, and this woman who I loved, I would often hurt with my words and sadly even with my hands. I have all these kids that we're giving birth to, and yet my heart is so numb. I'm still dealing with depression. It's hard for me to make decisions. I feel paralyzed when there's a big decision. And now I'm in ministry, and instead of it being about the glory of God, it's really about me and making a name for myself. Now, I knew that God had forgiven me of everything that I had done, so I would share about the abortion. And that led me back 7 years ago to being at a pregnancy center banquet, sharing about my abortion experience. And at that pregnancy center banquet was a man, some of you may know, his name's Brad Mattis. He's with the Life Issues Institute. He comes up to me and he says, David, how have you allowed Jesus to heal that wound of abortion? I thought that he already had, but I said to him, I've never asked him to do that. Well, he said, I'm going to do two things. Can I send you a book called Fatherhood Aborted? And can I set you up with a male peer counselor at a pregnancy center to go through an abortion recovery Bible study? He sent me the book, and God began to show me some of the things that I was dealing with that I couldn't shake free from. They were the effects of the abortion over 20 years ago. And as I went through this abortion recovery Bible study, God allowed me to open up my heart and those wounds that I had experienced to the Lord. And it has blessed my life. It has blessed my marriage. It has blessed my family. It has blessed my ministry. You're looking at a man who is complicit in the death of his own child. And by the grace of God, he's raised me up to be a champion for the unborn. He's called me to minister the compassion of Christ to men and women who find themselves in the throes of an unplanned pregnancy. And he's called me to minister the grace and healing of Christ to men that have been broken by an abortion. That's the transforming work of our God. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you, David. Wow. I love hearing more men talk about their abortion experience. That's one of the things in our work, I think, that is starting to pick up, to grow legs and get larger and larger, and we need that so much. I spoke recently at a new Cayman Men's Society event here in Orlando. It was about a year ago, and it was all men. And they stood in line after I spoke at this luncheon for an hour and a half, these men, to tell me, some of them for the first time, that they had an abortion in their past. They'd never even shared it with their wives. So thank you, David, for what you're doing, because these men need to be heard. Amen.